Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and I believe for the first time since I've been in Alaska, I forgot my coat. I'm so sorry. I feel like I came dressed for a snowball fight in my bathing suit. Thankfully, it's not that bad, but you get the drift. So I apologize for my very white shirt tonight. It is the 16th of March. It is Monday, and that's probably half the reason I forgot my coat. Weather.gov/Alaska is the best way to get information online from the National Weather Service. Anytime you want, you can get your local forecast information for your community or village and check warnings, watches, and advisories there. Now, the weather info line, 800-472-0391, that's always open there. Use a pen and pencil and write down the numbers you are listening to and punch in as you're getting your forecast information. It'll go a little bit faster the next time. Weather.gov/Alaska, of course, NWS Alaska on Facebook. And if you had any questions about what happened last night or what you may have seen on your television for the blizzard warning that looked like it was for Anchorage, read more about that on Facebook. There's a really nice discussion about how that came to be and maybe some of the confusing parts there. So next time that happens, you'll understand a little bit more about why that may happen and why we are not seeing a blizzard in the Anchorage area right now. The National Weather Service Alaska is on Twitter, as well as NWS Alaska, NWS Fairbanks, NWS Anchorage, and NWS Juneau, all friends on the Twitterland. And if you use hashtag AKwx, you'll be included in that Alaska weather conversation. That's what that's short for. In the afternoon, you can get your daily afternoon map briefing on YouTube. NWS Anchorage and NWS Fairbanks are the places to go for that. And if you like, at the end of the day, AKwx TV, you'll find this complete broadcast a little bit later on into the evening hours. If you miss a piece of that, you want to go back and watch the marine weather or perhaps check in on the aviation forecast before you step out the door in the morning. Your hazardous weather briefing shows us that winter weather advisories for snow are in effect from Cape Suckling to Cape Fairweather and around the Susitna Valley, generally west of the Parks Highway. Now, these two areas are expecting to see snow continue into the evening hours, and as we get into about 7 o'clock or so, this winter weather advisory for the northern parts of the Gulf will expire. We're expecting snowfall totals at that point to be around the 3 to 9 inch range, so things should be tapering off as we get into the next hour, hour and a half. A look up toward the north in the Susitna Valley, west of the Parks Highway, thinking about 6 to 8 inches of snow in total. Again, this will be tapering off as we head toward midnight, so the worst of it probably occurring right about now and tapering off into the late evening hours and closer to midnight. Way out west, we have a blizzard warning now in effect. About 2 to 3 inches of snow is expected for the Pribilofs. This is going to start up late tonight, and from about 7 o'clock to 7 p.m. tomorrow, we're expecting the winds to pick up to the north and east about 25 to as high as 40 miles per hour. Might be some stronger gusts in there. But the key factor in here is the word blizzard. What does that mean? Well, you have to have sustained winds, you have to have snow falling, and in this case, visibility is going to drop below a quarter mile. In fact, we're expecting near whiteout conditions, if not completely whiteout conditions, during that time frame. So until about 7 o'clock tomorrow, blizzard conditions are going to be likely in the Pribilofs, and you should adjust your plans if you have to drive even just a little bit across the island. Just keep in mind there that conditions might not allow you to do that, and be safe if you have to step out of doors during the daytime tomorrow. That will be for Tuesday, a blizzard warning in effect for the Pribilofs again until about 7 o'clock. That's the situation as we see it as far as the urgent weather goes. Now let's talk about the forecast. As we look out across the Bering Sea, we still have our northerly flow coming down the heart of the Bering, But notice what's happening here. We're starting to get that more southerly flow thanks to low pressure working its way up into the Bristol Bay region. Well, as you look at the ice situation here in a little while with me, you'll notice that the ice has dropped southward again into Bristol Bay. But with a situation like this means the Bristol Bay ice is probably going to lift back north again. So a lot of warm weather still trying to insert itself back into southwestern Alaska, and again we've got more warm weather working up across the northern Pacific. In the meantime, the wraparound cold is still coming across the western Bering Sea. Now across the rest of the Gulf, look at this. We've got a very strong area of low pressure across the central Gulf. This is bringing in that warm and wet air right back across south central Alaska. So far it's kept the wettest weather just offshore of southeast, so a lot of this is still out to your west and hasn't allowed that warmer and wetter air to make it back into southeast with any great surge of rainfall. Instead, it's focusing wind across south central Alaska. It's focusing precipitation around the Turnagain Pass area where more than a few inches of snow has fallen just today alone. Now, it's also focusing a lot of the wind across the higher terrain. If you're in south central, you've been flying into south central, driving into south central, you've probably noticed a lot of things going on today. The dust from the lack of snow is being stirred up, creating poor visibility. Some of that was the worst around the Connect Bridge earlier this afternoon. And we've got some very high wind gusts across the higher terrain, some of that reaching over 80 miles per hour up above the Alyeska Ski Resort and in the Chugach Mountains. Other gusts have been in the 40 and 50 mile an hour range. And at elevation, it's cold enough to snow, so it's probably creating some poor visibility there. Down below, it's just blowing the dust around, and it's considerably warmer than it was 24 hours ago. All of this is moving northward across the Alaska Range, and earlier today there were wind advisories present. The winds will continue to settle down, but we do expect some occasional gusts through the higher terrain and the gaps as we go into tonight and tomorrow. Some of those will probably not reach advisory or warning levels, but you may notice that if that hits your car just at the right time when you're driving through the pass. As we look out across the northern Yukon Valley and the eastern areas of the interior, you'll notice clouds are overtaking that region. Don't expect a whole lot of snow with that just yet, but we do expect a surge of snow to move up the west and southwestern areas and eventually reach Nome with another additional few inches of snow, perhaps as some of our favorite dogs and mushers are moving in. Low pressure across south central today at 988 millibars is attached to another surge of moisture a little bit further south. This will eventually creep eastward toward southeastern Alaska. In the meantime, Yakutat and many of our friends from Cape Suckling to Cape Fairweather are seeing another fair share of snow. Snow was falling across the higher terrain for south central, mostly rain a little bit further down the coast. Showers were seen around Kodiak today and areas across the lower Kuskokwim and lower Yukon valleys. Frontal boundary draped across the Arctic coast is bringing some blowing snow to places like Kaktovik this afternoon. And areas around the Kotzebue Sound, we're looking at some light snowfall. We had some heavier snowfall passing through the Pribilofs, and warmer air was lifting up across Bristol Bay. Some pockets in that cloud cover, though, were clearing up just enough for some sunshine to reach the ocean, as well as the northern Gulf Coast. Another puff of moisture moving northward across the western Gulf, shown around low pressure at 978 millibars. That will be tracking northward tonight. With that comes an opportunity for rain for the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay. North and west of Dillingham, we expect to see rain and snow developing, and north of that, it looks to be mainly snow at this point. Low pressure across the eastern Gulf, not showing a whole lot of wet weather at this point. It doesn't look like it's going to move back into southeast just yet, but you can still see that moisture flow trending right into the northern Gulf. So if this shifts just a little bit, you'll be able to see more rainfall in places like Sitka and northward toward Gustavus. Not at this point tonight. Out across the central Aleutians, rain mixed with snow starts to tap into some colder air, and that probably means a better chance for snow heading into Tuesday as low pressure drives northward toward Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. 981 millibar low there, with warmer air still lifting northward across the YK Delta and into Norton Sound. Rain and snow showers may be seen as far north as Unalakleet and maybe even north towards Stebbins. Some of that could also include some ice. Areas around the Brooks Range and the North Slope still looking at snow showers. Some areas of fog and flurries there north of Barrow and north of Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse. In the meantime, high pressure settling in across the eastern interior. With that, the wet weather is still being held out of central and southern parts of southeast. Areas north of Haines and Skagway and north of Gustavus and Cross Sound up toward Yakutat and into Prince William Sound. We'll be looking at some light rainfall as we head into Tuesday afternoon. Another surge of warmer air trying to lift northward still across the southern Gulf. That eventually moves north toward the northern Gulf by Wednesday afternoon. You can see some snow across some of the higher terrain of southeast, maybe Hyder still tapping into some of that, but most of the rainfall will hold off for most of southeast until Wednesday afternoon, and that's when it looks like that kind of slinks a little bit further eastward. In the meantime, south central, especially around Prince William Sound, the eastern Kenai Peninsula, and into southern parts of Cook Inlet, might be looking at some rainfall. Kodiak Island, probably you'll see a wetter day there. But you'll notice once again, just north of that, rain and snow showers will be possible across southwestern Alaska, across the Aleutians. Rain showers continue there for the central and eastern chain. And on the western side of that, snow all the way from the Seward Peninsula west of the Pribilofs, and blowing and drifting snow may be possible across the ice edge. But things warm up just a little bit more for the Pribilofs, so chances are that's going to be rain and snow rather than just snow and blowing snow on top of that. Across the north, high pressure is pushing a cold front across the north slope. With that comes a chance for some snow showers and some blowing snow in a few locations there. Snow still possible around the Seward Peninsula, both on the north and south side as we get into Wednesday afternoon. Here's a look at temperatures today. Warming up across southeast. Where it was not raining, it was considerably warmer, back in the 40s and 50s, and we saw that from all the way down toward Ketchikan and Annette and Craig and Klawock. Petersburg was in the 40s today. Juneau held out in the upper 30s. By late afternoon, warming up just a little bit more. Prince William Sound also in the 30s and 40s, and things continue to warm up in Anchorage. Up toward Fairbanks, only 18 degrees today. Pretty windy as well around Denali and Kantishna, areas around the Alaska Range, thanks to the pressure pattern we saw just a little while ago. 20 around Eagle. Fort Yukon was showing 0. The Arctic coast anywhere from 10 to 20 below. Again, thankfully not a whole lot of wind just yet. Around Kotzebue Sound, single-digit territory above 0. 8 in Nome. Teens for Norton Sound. Looked like Galena was showing 12. McGrath 14. Tanana was 4 degrees above 0. Bethel was at 18. Grayling also in the lower teens. And as you get out towards Sparivon, temperatures were in the lower 20s. 30s and 40s around Bristol Bay today. Lower 20s for the Pribilofs. 30s and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint was 39. Cold Bay and False Pass a little bit closer to 40 degrees. Low to mid 40s for Kodiak Island. 34 in Atka, and temps out around Shemya were showing 31. Overnight low temperatures will stay at or above 0 for most of the Yukon Valley there. As you head up toward Bettles, about 0 degrees there. 15 to 25 below for the Arctic coast. Nome looking at 3 above tonight. Southwest, teens, 20s. Bristol Bay just about freezing. It looks like mid-30s for most of the Alaska Peninsula, closer to freezing for the central and western chain. Kodiak 36, southeast in the 20s and 30s. Most areas, though, especially southern coastal areas, in the 30s and 40s, with south central just below freezing tonight. High temperatures tomorrow, though, for most of the Kenai Peninsula. The Matanuska and Susitna valleys will soar into the lower 40s. Kodiak 43, lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, 27 in the Pribilofs, again under blizzard conditions, and 20 in Nome, with temps at or just below 0 from Barrow westward down the Chukchi Sea coast, 10 above in Kaktovik, with significantly warmer weather north of the Yukon Valley, still in the teens and 20s for Ambler and Bettles, 33 in Eagle tomorrow. And you can see around Prince William Sound, 30s and 40s there. Southeast, you're looking at 40s and 50s in some cases, though most of that really warm weather will probably be limited to places like Craig and Klawock. Here's a look at your flying weather now. As you would expect, with the frontal boundary draped over the west, we should see IFR conditions all the way from Kotzebue Sound across the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, and into Nunivak Island, through the Pribilofs with blizzard conditions there, and through the central chain. Spotty IFR generally north of the Chilkoot and White Pass region, as well as some of the higher terrain and passes in Prince William Sound and west of the Parks Highway, where snow is expected to continue into early tomorrow morning before tapering off completely. Pass conditions, Anaktuvik Pass, IFR trending toward MVFR. We expect similar conditions for Adigan Pass through your Tuesday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should see improvements throughout your day, again, as drier air and warmer weather works in. Rainy Pass expecting to see MVFR conditions. Same goes for Windy Pass, at least through the midday hours, maybe improving all the way toward VFR. As we get toward Isabel Pass, also looking for some improvements, perhaps as far as VFR conditions by the afternoon. Mentasta Pass may see VFR by late afternoon. Tanita Pass, we expect to start out at marginal flight conditions, heading for VFR by late day. And Portage Pass, we expect to see improvements there as well, but the winds may still be rather blustery. Chilkoot and White Pass, as you just saw on the map, MVFR conditions may be possible by late day, but probably starting out at IFR. Your freezing levels show the cold air is retreating across southwestern Alaska. The freezing levels aloft as high as 4,000 feet north of Sitka and across areas around Dixon Entrance. And west of Kodiak Island, we have colder air that is also retreating there. Those levels as high as 2,000 feet for Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island. Icing potential shows areas above 3, maybe even 4,000 feet that could reach occasional moderate. That's mainly across the northern Brooks Range and parts of the North Slope. Most of the west coast, though, we'll be looking at light to isolated moderate icing potential there throughout your Tuesday afternoon. Some of that just west of Bristol Bay. And across southeastern Alaska, moisture is very close at the surface, but not close enough to rain. But it is close enough to give you some icing issues there. Across most of southeast, we'll probably see isolated moderate and occasionally some occasional moderate just west of Sitka above 6,000. The jet stream has our trough of low pressure dug out across a large part of the North Pacific, but the main issue right now is a stronger southerly flow that's helping to push that moisture and warmth back into the heart of Alaska, and that will continue that way tomorrow. South and westerly flows splitting across the North Slope between 50 and 60 knots. At 9,000 feet, you can see clearly a ridge of high pressure working up the west coast of North America and helping that warmer flow right up the west coast of Alaska. Anywhere from 20 to as high as 55 knots with this flow. The stronger winds still out over the western Gulf and Kodiak Island. Low pressure here across the central Aleutians just south of the chain right now. Those winds coming in from the south and east, and you can see 30-knot winds working up over Haida Gwaii between 25 and 30 knots. At 3,000 feet, a very similar pattern here. Our strongest flows out across the western Gulf between 45 and 55 knots, including Kodiak Island. Southerly winds working up through the interior, about 10 to 15 knots. Low pressure still south of the chain here, giving us more of a northerly flow for the central and western areas, and southeasterly winds across Haida Gwaii and Dixon Entrance running around 25 to 30 knots. So turbulence potential should be focused on the northern Gulf below 6,000 feet, probably areas just outside to about Yakutat, looking at some occasional moderate. Below 10,000 feet across the Alaska Range, watch for some of the gaps and passes there, and below 4,000 feet for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, some of that reaching occasional moderate. Also in the lee of the Alaska Range, below 4,000 feet for the central chain. So there's still some sticky flying weather going on across most of Alaska, especially in the west. We'll talk about what's happening at the marine level here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. On behalf of the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage and Alaska Public Media, thank you so much for tuning in to Hangar Flying. This evening, we are pleased to have Monique Stowers on our show. She is an air traffic controller in Anchorage. Monique, welcome to Hangar Flying.
Thank you, Mary.
Now, you currently work as a controller at Merrill Tower, and you've also been part of the Alaska Region Safety Outreach Team.
Mm-hmm.
That puts you in a perfect position to work with pilots on safety issues.
Yes.
So recently, there were some changes that took place to the special visual flight rules procedures. Can you tell us about the changes that have taken place in the Anchorage area and how they affect the procedures?
Well, yes, I can. The two significant changes to the procedures is, one, each individual segment will be providing separation within their own segment. The segment's defined by FAR Part 93, and in the Anchorage for our conversation today would be Anchorage segment, Lake Hood segment, and the Merrill segment. Previously, we all three provided separation together, which really bogged down the system. Now we provide separation services in each segment. The second change is we have now high visibility and low visibility special VFR. High visibility is when there's a ceiling, 700 broken, 800 overcast, but good, really good visibility underneath, more than 3 miles. That's high visibility. Low visibility is between 1 mile and less than 3 miles. Depending on for high visibility or low visibility, Merrill and Lake Hood will coordinate under low visibility. We no longer have to go through the TRACON as a clearinghouse for releases or air traffic coming in for special VFRs. It'll maximize the use of airspace and minimize the amount of time to get in and out of the segments.
So it'll make it safer, say, if pilots are flying over Point McKenzie waiting to come back into their home airport, whether it's Lake Hood or Merrill. This will shorten their time and get them back home safer, faster?
Definitely.
Oh,
definitely.
great.
Yes.
So, can you tell us, how does air traffic control separate the traffic in these conditions?
Well, we can use visual separation. We can use non-radar. One of the examples is visual, especially under the high visibility special VFRs. If I can see traffic coming in from Point McKenzie, I can depart somebody off of Merrill, and I can provide visual separation between those two aircraft two pilots departing successively can also maintain visual separation, leaving the segment or coming into the segment.
So this is still VFR, or visual flight rules, so a pilot is still responsible for seeing and avoiding traffic.
And that is the premise of this, yes.
Okay. And do pilots need a transponder with Mode C or any special equipment to operate with special VFR clearances?
Well, in the Class C, yes, you do need a Mode C transponder. But in the Class Delta surface areas, Lake Hood and Merrill, no, you do not need. All the pilot needs to do is take responsibility, 1 mile of visibility, and clear of clouds.
And one other thing that the pilots need to do in obtaining a clearance for a special VFR, you can't offer that to them.
No, we can't. And if you listen to the ATIS and it's 900 overcast and you call me 10 miles out and I tell you the field is up IFR, say intentions, I'm asking you to ask me for a special. I can't solicit it. I'm not being mean. I just can't solicit a special VFR.
You had a circumstance this weekend where you helped a pilot come in and gave him an extra kind of layer of protection from some weather. Can you tell us about that and how that worked?
Well, sure. I had a medevac helicopter come in from north of Bryant, and he's trying to get to Providence. And on initial contact, he asked me, how does it look? And of course, how the layers build along the hillside here in Anchorage. I said, I don't recommend. I recommend turning towards the city. It's wide open there. I had a helicopter holding over the city, filming the Iron Dog. And I also could see traffic departing international, and I told him that. So he was able to turn west, and got just west of Elmendorf Tower, and was able to get through the few cloud layers out there and then proceed direct to Providence. It was communication. Him telling me he couldn't proceed any much further, I telling him what I could observe, and he was able to get on his way.
But being honest and stating your intentions and saying what you can and can't do as a pilot safely kind of gives you a feel for what you need to provide for them communications-wise and inform them.
This is true. And that's why also, I'll bring this up, pilot reports are so very important. Just because I didn't solicit one doesn't mean you can't give me one. The last pilot I had for that aircraft was a 900-foot layer. He told me it was down to 300 feet. So that was a significant change in a very short amount of time. I needed to know that.
Wow. Well, thank you, Monique. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show, and hopefully this information will help some pilots conduct their operations safer and smarter.
Yes, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy hearing about aviation news, safety, and events in Alaska, please consider becoming a member of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. Your support helps us provide scholarships, host safety seminars, and bring you safety information through hangar flying. Thanks for watching, and if you're a pilot, please remember to file a pilot report. Fly safely.
See you again for another edition of Hangar Flying on Friday. Thanks, Mary. Here's a look at today's sea ice edge, and as we were talking about, that warmer air spreading northward will surely bring some changes to southwestern Alaska and the Bristol Bay region, and maybe even the ice edge north of the Pribilofs as those winds continue to warm things up across the west coast, and certainly the interior of Alaska and Cook Inlet, where there's plenty of ice there around Cowgan Island and points north at this point. As we look at the forecast for Tuesday in southeast, northerlies will come down the Lynn Canal, northeasterlies from Stevens Passage into Frederick Sound, about 10 to 20 knots there with 2 to 4 foot seas on the inside, including clear and straight. A south and easterly flow will continue up the outer coastline from about 20 to 30 knots with 12 to 13 foot seas in all areas. By Wednesday, very little change on the outer coast. 25 to 30 knots continues there, 11 to 12 foot seas. And northerlies extend a little bit further southward and increase their speed a little bit up to 20 knots there, 4 foot seas for Stevens Passage and Frederick Sound all the way up into the northern Lynn Canal, and southeasterlies inside of Clarence Strait at 25 knots with a 5 foot sea. For south central, northerlies inside of Prince William Sound with a 2 foot sea. Those are up to 15 knots now. North and easterly winds coming down Cook Inlet at 15 to 25 knots tomorrow, and easterlies across the Barrens with 25 to 30 knot winds there. 6 to 10 foot seas are expected with the higher seas in the western Gulf. Easterlies also coming into Kodiak Island at 30 knots. Those will diminish on Wednesday with a southeasterly flow at 25 knots with a 10 foot sea, and easterlies continue across Prince William Sound and the western Gulf from 20 to 30 knots, 4 foot seas on the inside of Prince William Sound, and north and northeasterly winds continue down Cook Inlet at 15 to 25 knots for Wednesday. For the Alaska Peninsula, a southeasterly flow continues into the Bristol Bay region at 30 knots. We're still carrying ice for Tuesday. Easterly flow north of the peninsula at 30 knots with a 7-foot sea. Otherwise, a north and easterly wind west of Castle Cape all the way out toward King Cove and Falls Pass at 35 to 40 knots with an 18-foot sea as you head down the coast in the North Pacific. South and easterly flow will continue for Wednesday. Easterlies inside of Bristol Bay still carrying ice there for now. South and easterly winds on the North Pacific side 20 to 30 knots with a 12-foot sea for the midweek. As you look at the Aleutians, north and easterly winds will be much stronger west of Nikolsky toward Adak, 45 to 50 knots there. The gales on the North Pacific side, 15 to 20 knots. Look for a 35-knot wind south of Unalaska. The winds will be much stronger, though, west of Dutch Harbor and Unalaska for your Tuesday. As we get into Wednesday, winds diminish in just about all areas for the central and eastern chain, 35 to 40 knots on the Bering side, and about the same there for the North Pacific with 12 to 16-foot seas expected and 12 to 18-foot seas in the north with the higher seas north of Adak and Atka. Northeasterlies become a little bit lower. They're out across the west from Kiska to Attu. Across the west coast, northerlies south of St. Lawrence Island over the ice at 20 to 25 knots. Northerlies for St. Matthew with a 5-foot sea there, up to 35 knots for the Pribilofs with an 11-foot sea. For Wednesday, north and easterly winds are still running about the same, 25 to 35 knots all areas, 11-foot seas in the Pribilofs and 9-foot seas around St. Matthew. Across the North Slope, easterly flow coming out of the Beaufort seacoast up to 25 to 35 knots, and northerlies coming down the Chukchi seacoast 10 to 20 knots. For Wednesday, you'll notice winds reduced to northwesterly directions around 10 knots or so, and northerlies into Kotzebue Sound around 10 to 20 knots. Recapping tonight's weather, winter weather advisories for snow are in effect for Cape Fairweather to Cape Suckling, including Yakutat, expecting 3 to 9 inches of storm total there by the end of this evening. And for areas west of the Parks Highway in the Susitna Valley, looking for about 3 to 6 inches there. Again, snowfall totals will diminish as we get into the evening hours. And out across the west, a blizzard warning starts up tomorrow morning for the Pribilofs, expecting about 2 to 3 inches of snow, but it'll be the northeasterly winds that'll blow up to about 45 miles per hour. That will significantly reduce visibility throughout the day, and because of that, whiteout conditions are possible. As you look northward, a frontal boundary extends along the western coast, and warmer air continues to lift northward throughout the remainder of the week. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.